Thanks for joining today's webinar on optimizing red meat labelling. I'm Grace, a Retail and Consumer Insight Manager here at AHDB. I'm going to take you through the top-line results of our latest piece of research on looking at how we can optimize meat labels. If you have any questions at all, please do feel free to drop us an email. So for our agenda, we'll take you through a quick road so far of our Reinventing series. Then we'll look at the methodology for this research. I'll show you what the optimised pack should look like and which of the labels we tested had the biggest impact. Then we'll go on to the details which back up our optimised pack. And finally, we'll give a summary of our key recommendations. So, the background and methodology. As a reminder, this is the fourth instalment of our Reinventing research, and in previous years we've covered the in-store environment, online, and also food service menus. Taking a step back to right at the beginning and why we started this work. Before the pandemic, we did a research project with Kantar, which found that 99% of meat, fish, and poultry losses were coming from unconscious reducers. Those consumers who didn't actively claim to be cutting back or following a vegan lifestyle, but maybe just were buying less meat than they realised. Of these unconscious reducers, 71 did not enjoy shopping for red meat. And research from IGD suggests 60% of shoppers would like more information when shopping for fresh red meat. Latest figures show that 21% of shoppers claim to be actively limiting their meat consumption. We did workshops with all of the processors before we started the first in our Reinventing series, and words on the right are some of the words that they used to describe the meat aisle. I think it's useful to remind ourselves of the hierarchy from the in-store research before we dive into the labelling, because this definitely builds on the research that we had before. The key findings from the in-store research were that firstly, we need to attract people into the aisle with inspiration. We can do this by using foodie imagery and also giving them confidence to cook red meat. Secondly, once the shoppers get to the fixture, we need to engage them, and this is where farming messaging comes in. We also found that greenery and the colour green really gave off positive perceptions of sustainability and health. Then finally, the final reassurance that shoppers needed was a health message on pack. For this research, we did it in 3 stages. The first stage, we identified which messages were the most important to shoppers, and we did this through a max diff exercise with over 600 meat eaters. Secondly, we did a qualitative online community forum with 20 shoppers. We could really get into the detail about what shoppers were looking for. And then finally, we created 20 labels with a range of imagery and messaging, which came out of the first 2 stages. And we tested this with over 1,500 shoppers via an online survey to really validate those first 2 stages with a really strong base size so that we could get a robust understanding of shopper preferences. And also look at where there might be any nuances, so we're able to analyse by different subgroups and also different shopper preferences. We tested a range of messaging across different proteins and cuts. This allowed us to see if there were any differences. We wanted to test a lot of health messaging because we knew that this was important from the in-store research, so most of the cuts that we chose were more primary cuts, as this enabled us to include some of those messages. But it wasn't just health messages that we tested, we also tested messages about animal welfare, environment, and cooking advice. We tested everything versus a baseline pack with no messaging or imagery, which is what a lot of standard meat packaging looks like at the moment. These are quite small on the slide, so now I'm just going to run through them slightly bigger. These are the 3 packs that we tested for pork medallions. These are the 3 packs that we tested for pork loin joints. Here are the beef sirloin steak packs. And these are the beef mince packs. Finally, we tested 3 packs for lamb leg steaks. So those are all the packs we tested, and from that we came up with our final hierarchy recommendation. Firstly, inspiration was the biggest driver of purchase intent, so having strong foodie imagery on the pack is essential. Also, having information on cooking times gives shoppers confidence in cooking. For those more tricky cuts like lamb, an option to find a full recipe or a call out that instructions are on the back of pack can be useful. Secondly, shoppers want health and provenance information so that they can make an informed decision. Health is a driver of purchase, and highlighting the multiple benefits of red meat, particularly where it's low in fat, is key. Vitamin and mineral content with a tangible consumer benefit for consumers also tested positively. Highlighting British where possible, with nods to animal housing and rearing such as outdoor bred, grass-fed or free range all tested well. Assurance schemes were one of the main things that shoppers look for, but a simple logo was enough for most. Finally, farming and sustainability messaging would still be the most effective within the fixture, but if you do have space on pack or you have a unique message for a certain product, then they could sit on the label. QR codes were a reassurance for shoppers, even if most said that they wouldn't scan them. Sustainability messaging appeared to be particularly appealing to shoppers who were cutting back on their meat consumption. So of the labels we showed you, we asked participants to pick their favourite for each of the cuts, and the ones with the foodie imagery were the clear winners across all of the cuts and the proteins, with over half of people selecting the pork medallions, pork loin and beef steak pack which had the foodie imagery on. It didn't matter what the other messaging was, it didn't matter whether it's animal welfare or environmental messaging, as we had a range of different options, but the foodie imagery clearly won across all of the cuts. And we see this come through in the heat maps of what was appealing to shoppers. The foodie pictures really drawing people into the packs. And we also see that the British message is appealing to shoppers. When we look at the favourite options across the different retailer types, the foodie imagery came out as the favourite no matter where shoppers shopped. Convenience shoppers were slightly more drawn to the foodie imagery. Here is a breakdown of shoppers' favourites across the different cuts. So for pork medallions, there was a clear winner here, and this actually saw the biggest difference in terms of appeal. For the pork loin joint, again, more than half of shoppers picking that really foodie imagery. For sirloin steaks, more than half of shoppers picking that cooked dish. Beef mince was the closest of the packs that we tested, but the foodie imagery still came out on top, but only just won over the grass option. For beef mince, the fat percentage was the most helpful piece of information on the pack, so making this really clear for shoppers is essential. Most people feel confident that they know how to cook beef mince, so maybe the imagery was slightly less inspiring. However, some shoppers were swayed with that regeneratively farmed information, which we'll go into more detail in a minute. And finally, for lamb leg steaks, again, that foodie imagery really coming through. So now you've seen the hierarchy of our recommendations, but we can dive into the data in a bit more detail. Inspiration, as we've seen, is the most important thing to get right on the pack. But we also see that packs that have foodie imagery were the most appealing and also saw the highest likelihood to purchase with significant uplifts versus the baseline. We also saw shoppers saying that it was the imagery which was the key driver towards purchase. We asked shoppers which was the most compelling inspiration and taste messages, and the top message which came out was the same as that we had in store: how to cook the perfect whatever cut you're doing, steaks, chops, roasting joints. This was particularly important for those cuts where shoppers may be less familiar, such as pork medallions or lamb. Quality guaranteed came in a close second in terms of the messaging. Once the packs are suitably eye-catching to shoppers, they want two key pieces of information to help them to make an informed decision. When we ask shoppers, they say that health was the most important, and this is where we need to be careful, as we know that what shoppers claim and how they behave can be very different, as we see that inspiration came out as one of the lowest considerations. But we did see that when we showed shoppers packs with health messaging, there were significant uplifts in perceptions versus those without health messaging but excluding the baseline. These were seen as more exciting, more tasty, higher quality, and they're also seen as more relevant for shoppers. Our pork medallion pack, which had the biggest gap in appeal compared to the other packs that we tested, had this 9 vitamins and mineral messages included on it. And 69% of shoppers said that this gave them all of the health messaging they needed to make an informed decision and saw a significant uplift versus the baseline. We have previously tested research that health is particularly motivational for pork, but is also important for the other proteins. From the in-store research, we found that a pack that had health messaging on saw basket size increase by 4%. In the online community, we did ask people about health logos. We tested a couple of logos which are currently being used on pack in store. In general, shoppers didn't particularly like these. Some found the protein claim useful, but most thought that they were stating the obvious and didn't give enough health details. Products being lean and vitamin B12 were the top health messages that we tested with shoppers. Here, we didn't include the 9 vitamins and minerals because it changes across the different proteins, but we believe that it would be highly motivating if it was on pack, although we acknowledge this can be a very tricky task to get all of those vitamins on the nutrition table. The other information that shoppers need was around animal welfare and assurance schemes. While we've seen that health can be highly motivating, animal welfare and assurance schemes tend not to be, but not having this information can be a big detractor. So while having the information may not encourage purchase, it does prevent losses and boost long-term perceptions. In our max diff, it actually came out as the top piece of information that shoppers wanted. There were a few nuances by cut, with farming practices being more important for pork and farm specifics being more important for lamb. Well, there were a few variations by shopper types as well, with those who shop at discount stores finding information on farm less important, and premium store shoppers thought that grazing practices was more important. However, when we delved deeper in our online community into what information consumers wanted on assurance schemes, for most, we found that a simple logo was enough. In our online community, it was clear that assurance logos are a reassurance rather than a driver of purchase. Other research that we conduct in our consumer tracker with YouGov shows a good level of awareness, particularly for red tractor, and to a lesser extent RSPCA assured. However, when we ask shoppers, they're not always exactly sure what the marks mean. However, this doesn't really seem to bother them. Having the logo is reassurance enough for shoppers and boosts the quality perceptions. When we asked shoppers which messages were important for farming and environment, grazing practices came out as the most important, with grass-fed and free range coming out top, closely followed by outdoor bred. I think it's also interesting to note here that we included plastic reduction, which is still important to shoppers, but potentially to a lesser extent than we've seen in previous years. The final learning around reassuring shoppers was on the sustainability aspects. Here you can see the minced packaging, which had a regeneratively farmed message, was the pack of choice for shoppers who were cutting back on their meat consumption, and it was also preferred by lighter shoppers. Just a reminder that only 21% of people currently claim to be cutting back on their meat consumption, so it is a small proportion of the population. It might be easier and also give you more space on the label to include sustainability and farming messaging with other pieces of point of sale in the fixture, unless you are particularly looking to target a meat reducing shopper. From the in-store research, this was the most effective place to have this messaging, and this is where we would still recommend that you include it. We've seen this before, but as you can see at a total level, the environmental and animal welfare messaging is generally less motivating to shoppers. So it's nice to have potentially a third message, but it's not something that we should be leading on pack. If you do want to include sustainability messaging, this often causes shoppers to have more questions than when they started. So to try and reduce clutter on labels, we recommend QR codes to signpost shoppers towards more information. Even if they may never scan it, many shoppers said that it would reassure them that the information was there if they ever did need it. It also shows transparency within the industry. There were a few watch out areas, and most people said that they wouldn't necessarily scan a QR code in store, but it's still a useful option to have. Finally, we asked shoppers what they would view as being more premium. There were areas of existing packaging which came through in the looks, such as darker colours and more expensive packaging, giving the products a premium feel. We also saw maturation times being the key lookout for a more premium product. We did test a pack with an age message, and perceptions of taste over-index on this pack. Further information on breed and cut type also came up spontaneously in our online forum when discussing premium meat. So, to sum up the research, you saw at the beginning our hierarchy, which would be our overall recommendation, but there were a few areas which were seen as gold standard, which may not be currently realistic, and there were also a few learnings from mistakes that we made along the way. Our gold standard recommendations would be around getting the image perfect. In the online community, we tested a pack with a standard looking spaghetti bolognese rather than something that was really tasty, and it had a bit of a meh reaction. We also included an image of mince in lettuce cups, and this was seen as a dish which people wouldn't necessarily cook at home. So finding the balance between these images is the trickiest part. The dish also needs to be a whole dish. Lots of the inspiration came from seeing the whole plate with the accompaniments as well. Including all the vitamins and minerals can be very motivating for shoppers, but we know that there's a lot of work and expense in putting all of these on the pack. Finally, having information on the exact farm where the product came from, or at least the region or county, is seen as gold standard by consumers. One of our top learnings was that we didn't include enough information on grazing practices on the packs that we tested, as this came out spontaneously from shoppers saying they wanted more information. Also, some shoppers were unsure if the vitamins and minerals that we included on the pack were natural, so making this clear is essential. Several shoppers also didn't like the size of the stickers that we used, as they covered up too much of the product. Finally, having too many messages can make it harder for shoppers to navigate. So one longer message plus a few simple ones seems to be the optimum. If there is more information that you think shoppers might want, make use of those QR codes. So finally, a reminder of our hierarchy. Inspiring shoppers to pick up the pack and think about the tasty dish that they could make with it should be done through imagery, but also through simple messaging about cook time. Secondly, to help shoppers make their informed choice, include health messaging on fat content and vitamins and minerals. This should be paired with British messaging and grazing practices where possible. If you have any questions or you would like any help in being able to deliver some of these changes in store, then please do let us know. Thank you for listening.